here today is wondering how the heck she has the same 24 hours that I do and fits all of this into her life. She's a full-time mechanical engineering student, president of Pi Tau Sigma, the Mechanical Engineering Honor Society, former president of the SGSU SWE Society, the Society for Women Engineers. She's a researcher in neurophysiology and is presenting her own research at the Society for Neuroscience Conference next month in San Diego. She's a member of the Spartan Racing team on the Formula SAE. Her part's the drivetrain, which she's using for her senior design project. Add that to all of her fun stuff. She does rock climbing, mountain climbing, building robots, the list goes on. She's going to tell you about a special program that she's participated in. With that, I'd like to welcome Joy to 100W's Green Talk.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here, so thank you for having me. I think I'm most excited about getting to talk to you today about something that I did over the summer and some of the things that I've learned in the process of being a Salzburg Scholar, and I'll explain what that means in a second. So the title of the talk today, You, Global Citizenship, and the World. These are just some of my perspectives as being a San Jose State engineering student, but also having the opportunity to learn about global citizenship and develop some of my own thoughts on what that means for engineering students. So I hope that in the style of Salzburg, which again I'll describe in a little bit, that this can be a conversation. You know, so rather than talking at you, I hope that we can talk about these things together and that you can feel free to ask questions during the middle of the talk if something's not clear or if I haven't really defined something properly. I'm more than happy to stop and cover anything that you're interested in. So for today, sorry if I can navigate my mouse properly, and apparently I'm having navigational issues. So for today, we're going to start by covering just a little bit of background. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story because it'll help you gain some perspective on why am I here and what I'm going to talk about. And then we'll go into what is the big picture, what is the take-home message that today's talk is covering, and then how does that relate to you? Why does that matter to you? And why does it matter to engineering? And finally, we'll try to piece all of these different ideas together into how all of that fits into this great big world. So to start out, like you, I have parents, and I have lots of different interests, as Dr. Linsdell was kind enough to describe. So, you know, there's me in New York City, probably my favorite city in the world, but more specifically, Brooklyn. I love racing cyclocross, doing research, my family including SWE, Society of Women Engineers, and now Spartan Racing. You know, my dad is a police officer, my mom, great-grandparents, you know, so like many of you, I have kind of a diverse background, and there are lots of different things that have gone into making me who I am today. So what I'm doing here today is partly because I was in this global citizenship program, still am, where, as you can see on the left there, a group of San Jose State students went to Salzburg, which is in Austria. I am aware it's not in Germany. And you can see us there. We spent an entire week at the Schloss Leopoldskron, where we learned all about global citizenship, which I promise I will define global citizenship in just a second. But first, I want to tell you one of the stories I heard while I was at Salzburg that greatly motivated me to give this talk today. And part of the reason why I was so excited to come back to San Jose State, talk about global citizenship, talk about what it means. And it started with this woman, Astrid, who you can see on the right there. And I know my eyes are closed in both of these pictures, or nearly closed. Not the most photogenic, but that's okay. So Astrid was one of the faculty members at Salzburg, and she was born in West Germany. not too long after World War II. So everybody knows World War II, and does everybody recall how West and East Germany was divided? So the Allies had taken hold of West Germany, and they had also taken hold of West Berlin, which until I actually went to Salzburg, I never really thought about the fact that West Berlin was sort of an island in East Germany. So this little inset here goes up there, and I'd never really thought about the fact that if you were a West Berliner, you were stuck in the middle of East Germany and completely isolated from your supporting nations. So Astrid was born in West Germany, the dark green section, but she ended up going to university in West Germany, that dark green section within that huge light green section. And she told us the story about having to cross 2 borders in each direction every time she went home to visit her parents. So how many of you were not born in the Bay Area? Or raise your hand if your family is not in the Bay Area. Wow, that's a pretty good amount. Okay, so if you had to cross 2 borders every time you went home to see your parents, and then 2 on the way back, can you just imagine, right? So, and that on the right there, that picture up in the right, that's kind of a schematic of what the Berlin Wall was. So that's just one of the borders that she had to cross to leave West Germany, leave West Berlin, go through East Germany, and then enter West Germany. And I remember her saying that she was lucky that her passport had lots of pages. And that was one of my favorite things that she said that week, because it sort of showed how over the course of her college years, she had gotten into this routine of having to go through border crossings. And it just made me think about what my life would be like if that was my reality. So of course, she also described how when she was at university, the night that the wall came down. Now raise your hand if you are familiar with the Berlin Wall and it coming down. Okay, good, awesome. So you can see on the bottom right there, that's a picture taken the night that the wall came down, just the massive influx of people who came to see this wall come down. So you can sort of see what it represented in this community, how it divided people, and how if you were in East Berlin or West Berlin, you were separated from your fellow Germans. Remember, this wasn't always in place there. So this sort of opened my eyes up to a perspective that I'd never really had before. And after being in Salzburg, I went to Berlin. I was really excited to go to Berlin. It's probably my 2nd favorite city now. And what is left of the wall is a memorial. And so it stretches, I think, about a mile, and I walked all of it. And all along the wall memorial, artists have made these murals. So this is just one picture that I took of one of the murals. And the inset there on the right-hand side is actually a Jamaican bar. And I was pretty surprised to find that there was this beautiful Jamaican beach bar in Berlin along the wall memorial, nonetheless. And I thought it was kind of a great little symbol of how, of diversity and change and legacy, and how the wall memorial itself, all of these murals carry this tone of world peace and unity. So it was quite an experience for me, just walking around Berlin, looking at the graffiti, looking at graffiti in different languages, looking at the political messages. This upper right image here, the red one, was on the side of a building, and I probably should have shown you a clearer picture, but the city of Berlin is just infused with so much art, and all of it carries huge political messages that you really start to understand the culture, the legacy, the history, and what a profound, lasting effect it had on this community. This was probably my favorite mural that was on the Berlin Wall memorial, and that's why I chose it for today's talk, because you can sort of see this tone of an individual, this entity reaching out towards what seems to be the world. And so that was that experience of learning someone else's background, going and visiting different places, looking at historical monuments. As an engineering student, it opened my eyes to perspectives I'd never had before, and I gained this appreciation for the role of history and political science, even though I'm an engineering student. So I wanted to share that story with you because it was a big motivator for me to come and talk to you today. And I hope that it was as interesting to you as it was to me. So I want to get to the big picture. What exactly is it that I'm talking about today? Why am I here? So global citizenship, I mentioned it, I promised I would unpack this term, and actually unpacking terms was one of my favorite phrases from Salzburg. And so it just means before I talk about global citizenship, I need to define it for you so that we're on the same page. My favorite definition of global citizenship, this actually came from Wikipedia. You would think that after going through a global citizenship program, I could just define it on my own. But I really wanted to see what other people said. And there were two takeaway points that made the most sense to me. First of all, global citizenship means understanding you in the world, right? Does anyone want to give me how many people there are in the world? Just shout it out. It's around 7 billion, and it's quickly approaching 8 billion. That's a lot of people, right? So understanding you in the world really means understanding that each of us is kind of a little speck in this great, huge place. That's definitely not to scale. So the second part of global citizenship is really it's just having global mindedness. It means that not only do you understand who you are in this world, but it's also when you make choices, you understand that your choices affect other people in the world. So those two things combined, to me, define global citizenship in the way that we're going to talk about it today. So finally, the big picture. I know, it's a little long into the talk to finally get to the main point. I'm sorry. But why does global citizenship matter to engineering? That's the whole reason why I'm here today, is because I wanted to not only talk about what global citizenship is with you, but why it matters to you, the engineering student. Why should you care? And one of my favorite examples is Starbucks. And I actually am not a Starbucks drinker, so I'm sorry. I like Philz, though. Do you guys like Philz? Yeah? Yeah. Always get a shout out for Philz. So, all right, Starbucks. What goes into making a single cup of Starbucks? And you may have never really thought about engineering and Starbucks before, but think about it. You have supply chain. You have to source the beans. You have to grind them, so you need some type of manufacturing process to develop, to take them from bean to grind safely and to transport them. You also need a paper cup that's not going to burn somebody, and if it does burn someone, you're not going to be liable for it. You also need, that was a joke, by the way. You also need a way of transporting these things across oceans, right? What happens when paper is exposed to water? It doesn't do so well, right? So it takes a lot of engineering to bring that single cup of Starbucks to you. So what this image shows is all of the different resources that go into that cup of Starbucks and where they come from in the world. And this was taken from one of my global citizenship books. I'm sorry I didn't put the reference there. So the green arrows show a coffee bean source, where the beans are grown, all over the world. The red ones show where the paper comes from, mostly Europe, a little bit of Canada. That's that orange spot place up there to the left. Just kidding. And then also sugar. Sugar, in this case, is mostly coming from Brazil. So if you're an engineer and you work for Starbucks, just imagine all of the different cultures, languages, people that you have to interface with to bring that cup of Starbucks to your consumer. And I think that that example sort of illustrates how global citizenship relates to engineering. So on that note, I promised my friends in the audience, because I'm very lucky to have a couple of friends in the audience today, that I would try to keep the talk interesting. And I know that we all love YouTube videos, at least I do. And so if you needed more motivation to care about the world, I wanted to show you one of my favorite videos. It was a group of people who went to 11 countries, and they filmed it, put it into a 1-minute video. So in 1 minute, you're going to see 11 countries. And I think that seeing how beautiful those countries are might motivate you to get out and move. And hopefully the internet works. So that's the big picture. Global citizenship, engineering, it should matter. At least I think it should matter. And now, how does that relate to you? What about you, right? At the end of the day, it's all about us. So when you look at all of the people in this room, we're a pretty diverse bunch, right? So I took this map, and I just plotted a couple of things. First of all, San Jose State. Obviously, if you're in this room, you go to college in San Jose State, at San Jose State in California. But that doesn't necessarily mean you were born here. Who was not born on this continent? Anybody? Nice. Oh, wow. That's pretty good. You see? Yeah, pretty diverse. I put Alaska up there because I actually have a friend from Alaska, which I was excited about. I also put roughly where I think Ghana is, this little teal one here, because I have a friend from Ghana. A lot of other ones. The yellow one over there, I put for Simone. Simone's in the audience, right, because she went to Australia. And then GTI, of course, over by China. Has anybody been to on the GTI, in the GTI program? One GTI person. Is anybody going to apply for it? Another person? Okay, so maybe you might be a little motivated to apply for it. So GTI. When you look at everybody in this room, you have this incredibly diverse group of people who are born in different places, have traveled to different places in the world. Your family are from other places. Oh, also that lower, this one here, I put that there for Dr. Linsdell because I know that she went to Antarctica, and one of my favorite stories from her was her talking about the voyage to Antarctica. So everybody in this room has a diverse background, and one of the biggest sources of diversity comes from what we call the accident of birth. And this is an idea that also came from the Salzburg seminar from Jochen, who's one of my favorite faculty lecturers. And this accident of birth means, did you have control over where you were born? Did you have control over who you were born to? None of us did, right? We just sort of appeared in this world. And that accident of birth, where you just happen to land in this world, it shapes the way that you see the world. And I chose 3 mechanisms by which it shapes that. So the first one is media. And I actually pulled this example from Alyssa Miller's talk, TED Talk, which, do you guys watch TED Talks? Anybody? Any TED lovers? I'm such a TED groupie. So I love this talk that she gave. She was a CEO of public radio, and she gave a talk about the disparity in news coverage from the United States in world news. So this is going to be a very poor resolution image. I apologize in advance. But in 2007, they took, with this group, World Mapper, They took all of the time that the United States spent on world news, and then they plotted it by country. So what you see is a map of the world where the size of the country is based on how much time the media spent covering their news, right? So what you see here, this huge bluish purple thing is the United States. 76%, was it 76? No, it was 79. 79% of all media coverage that month was spent on the United States news. And what Alyssa Miller goes on to describe is that this was the same month that North Korea decided to disarm, or agreed to disarm its nuclear weapons. It was also when an intergovernment group in France showed how humans have impacted climate change. And it was also when there was a major flood in Indonesia. In that same month, 79% of news coverage was on the United States. So if you live in the US, your perspective of the world is reflective of how much world news you actually get. Now, what Alyssa goes on to say, which is really interesting, is that if you remove one story, you see a slightly corrected version of the US news. And that one story happened to be Anna Nicole Smith's death. Does anyone remember who Anna Nicole was or her death? Okay, so a couple of people. Basically, she was a pop star, right? So this one pop star's death massively overshadowed North Korea disarming their nuclear weapons. So being in the United States, if you just happen to be born here, the world you see is shaped by that accident of birth. It's also shaped by the maps that you see. So these two maps, the one on the top, right? So a map, just to rewind for a second, sorry. Think about a map, okay? So you have a 3D structure, you have a 3D space, right? You need to project that 3D space onto a 2D surface. Now, you use an algorithm, you use a mathematical algorithm to do that. And the most common one is the Mercator projection. Does this map look familiar? It should. Yeah, anybody? Okay. So the world you see, think about something for a second. Does the globe have a true top and bottom with respect to the universe? No, it doesn't. The solar system is all tilted in the universe, and I don't even know which way we're oriented with respect to that. So why is it then that our map has this orientation? You know, it's just something to think about. I don't want to make a statement about it, but I just want you to think about, where does this map come from? Also, what's at the center of this map? Why is it that Europe is pretty much the closest to the center? Why isn't Australia at the center of this map? So these things change how we see the world because they're what we grow up with. The other thing to take note of is how big the United States looks relative to Africa. If you were to do a coastline to coastline comparison, right? Compare coastline to coastline between the United States and Northern Africa, I mean, they look roughly about the same to me. But if you were to plot the world based on land mass, how different the world looks. Now look at the size of Africa, right? So this is if you took all of the land in the entire world and you plotted all the countries by how much land mass they occupy. You suddenly see a very different picture of the world. And you realize that Africa is this huge continent, and I didn't include it in my slides, but it's true size of Africa. If you Google the true size of Africa, you will see how the majority of the major countries in the world all fit within the continent of Africa. So these are just things to think about in terms of how you see the world and how your upbringing, your culture, it shapes the way that you see the world. So the final example that I'll point out to you is also one of my favorites. This is a composite satellite image of the Earth at night. So what NASA and NOAA did together is on clear nights when there was very little moonlight, they took satellite images of the Earth to show the illumination all over the Earth, right? So what do you immediately notice? And then they piled all the images together, right? So this wasn't just one snapshot. What do you notice immediately? The east coast of the United States, how bright it is. Where else is illuminated? Europe, Japan. Now the next question, what's not illuminated? Africa, yeah. I mean, it's very interesting, right? And if you take a closer look, you see a different picture. You see the effects of that lack of lighting. So these are students in Burkina Faso, which admittedly I did have to look that up on Google and find out where exactly that was. It's in West Africa. And these students are then forced to study in the streets. So just think about your life for a moment and think about what it would be like to study engineering in a place that had no lights, where you didn't have lights in your house at home. How would you do your homework? How would you read your textbooks? I mean, I know most of us don't read our textbooks, and we should, but how would you if you wanted to? You know, so how would this change your ability to make a better life for yourself? All of these things, where you just happen to end up in this world, who you just happen to be born to, they all change how you see the world. And in the end, what you get is a world full of incredibly diverse people, even within this room. If I were to sample all of you, I would guess that there are at least 3 major religions in this room. I mean, gender, okay, male or female, but there are people who consider themselves neither of those. Education level, high school, whether or not your parents went to high school, whether or not you went to college. There are a lot of people in the world who still don't go to college. A lot of people in the world who prefer a 2-year trade degree, right? So all of these factors, they build diversity. They make up a very diverse group based on where we were born, who we happen to be born to, and what we were exposed to when we were raised. So that's you and me. That's us. That's the people in the world. But again, how does that relate to engineering? Because I know by now you're probably like, okay, why am I in a political science course? Why am I in a general ed class right now? So let's talk about engineering. Why does diversity and global citizenship matter to you, the engineering student? Now, I really like this image because unless you're going to go live under a rock, or, okay, maybe you're going to go into business for yourself, you want to do something really small, very locally, you may not have to interact with people from all over the world. But even then, if you were a small business, you'd probably have to order your products from somewhere, right? Or you may have to get your computers serviced by technical support in India or China, maybe. So you as an engineering student, you have the potential to work for companies that have stakes in multiple countries throughout the world. And so it would be very unlikely that you would never have to interface with people from other cultures. Just to take an example, let's see, is anybody interested in energy and engineering for energy or green energy? Civil engineers, this probably matters a lot to you. Just look at how many different countries produce oil, where most of the oil comes from. So if you have anything to do with energy production, you could end up talking to people in Brazil, Venezuela. So what you see here is map of the world, again, because I love maps, but you also see where oil is produced.